I went to the school of hard knocks and learned it the hard way by being on the other end of a bunch of wrongful termination lawsuits.
Mark Schwartz, so great to have you in 20-Minute Leaders. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
This is gonna be so much fun. I'm so excited for the next 20 minutes because we're gonna talk about how you were on the board of directors of Starbucks and you helped them raise their first institutional funding. We're gonna talk about firing without adverse consequences, a class you teach at Claremont, if I'm not mistaken. You did Harvard MBA. You went to Claremont before, and I'm really, really excited. Let's start off. Back in the day, we're at Starbucks and you're getting involved.
So the process of helping Starbucks raise capital was not an easy one in many perspectives. It was difficult internally at my investment banking firm, Donaldson, Lufkin, Jenrette. I remember going to banking review for approval of the deal, taking a red eye. And there was this one person on the committee who couldn't understand why anybody would pay $1 for a cup of coffee. And he looked at the first page of the book and used the F-bomb word maybe, 30 times. Who's going to pay an effing dollar for an effing cup of coffee, yada, yada, yada. And I turned to my colleague and said, who's going to tell him it's $1.50? Basically, I managed to walk into Tony James's office, who's the vice chair of Blackstone, and told him that, look, Tony, you're on the board of Costco, and Jeff Brotman is mentoring Howard Schultz. It's 6:30 in the morning out there. Call him and tell him we're not going to do the deal. And Tony said, okay, just get the deal done. And I said, what about banking review? And he said, we just had it. And then the other issue was the company had just opened its first store in Chicago, which was out of the Pacific Northwest, and it wasn't going well. And the key learning and lesson from opening new stores in a new territory is, just like the expression, all politics is local, it can be said that all retail is local. And so the consumer behavior in Seattle wasn't necessarily the same as the consumer behavior in Chicago. People didn't stop in the winter in Chicago, even though 400,000 people walked in front of the store. And ultimately, they closed the store.
Wow.
We did get the funding done. We actually raised 30% more than we were going out for. We probably could have done even more than that. We did it at a slight discount to our offer price. But the good news is we raised more capital than we needed, and we got the deal done. And I think the most important issue in raising capital at any stage is getting the capital. It doesn't matter. It's pretty binary. Either you got the money or you didn't. And so we were able to get the money and move forward. And then I got to serve on the board, which was a fascinating experience because
Sure.
I was a young investment banker and I learned more than I contributed.
Mark, unbelievable. Did you have the slightest understanding that Starbucks is going to become what it is today?
I knew that Howard Schultz was a unique executive and entrepreneur, even though a lot of people couldn't see that. I think he had a certain charisma and a passion that was rare. So I think eventually it would be successful. You know, it wasn't always great success, but I think he was an unbelievable student and
Wow.
best people on his team, and was just fearless about going after something.
Amazing, amazing. Okay, Mark. So I wanted you to take me a little bit throughout your different, because you also co-founded the largest U.S. Hispanic supermarket, and you are now teaching a class about how to fire without adverse consequences. So tell me a little bit about your life, about what drives you and your passion, and then let's move on to firing, because it sounds like something that every CEO needs to really hone, and it's a lesson that I'm going to have to learn either the hard way or the easy way. I'm going to choose the easy way through this talk.
So it was through the Starbucks connection that I got introduced to somebody who became my partner in founding Bodega Latina, the Hispanic Supermarket company. Jamie Shannon introduced me to Al Lujan, and we worked kind of as a side gig on this. And then when it was getting very difficult to have fundraising meetings only in the evenings and on weekends and sneaking a few in, I decided to take the big plunge. I was definitely inspired by Howard Schultz in my own entrepreneurial journey. I think the training I got in investment banking was excellent, but there was something about being an entrepreneur that was liberating. And that was a great experience that I think I really wanted to have.
Right. So if you didn't just have an entrepreneurial experience, but you've co-founded
Right.
the largest U.S. Hispanic supermarket. What size did it get to? Just to
over $3 billion in revenue.
Easy, just 3 billion. Just another entrepreneurial experience. But Mark, most importantly, let's jump into this firing without adverse consequences. What is that about? Why are you teaching a class in entrepreneurial finance about firing without consequences?
So at my alma mater, Claremont McKenna College, I serve on the board of the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And often at meetings, students would come in and pitch us for funding for their business, or their app, as I would call it. And to sort of diffuse.
By the way, when did it transition from business to app? Around what? How long ago?
In most cases, it never did in my mind. I got an app and I want money. Yep. Okay, do you have a business? So oftentimes what I would do, these were students in their, 19, 20, 21 years old, and they were good at creating an app, but I don't know that they had any idea or concept of managing a business and building a team, etc. So I would use this question as a way of sort of really kind of separating wheat from the shaft. I'd say, tell me about the last 2 people that you fired and how that went. And I'd get a deer in the headlights response.
Right.
Oh, don't worry. You probably took that course in college. And again, there isn't that course, so you couldn't have taken it. And I did this a couple of times. And then I think what the tipping point for me was a company that I had invested in, and a founder that I was mentoring sent me an email saying, on a Friday afternoon saying, I'm thinking of firing my co-founder. Do you have any tips? And I thought that was such a broad, expansive question. It's like, I want to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
Do you have any ideas of a business that I could be the founder of?
I like the analogy, yeah.
And so what I did was I put together kind of a resource list based upon my own education. So I too did not take that course. I went to the school of hard knocks and learned it the hard way by being on the other end of a bunch of wrongful termination lawsuits. So I put together this lecture on how to fire without adverse consequences. And then ultimately I repurposed it for a school of nonprofit management. And I wrote a case study based upon a nonprofit organization that I was involved with and the firing of the executive director, and changed the name so it would be fictitious.
Right.
And, you know, a couple of the key takeaways from that. First of all, again, all politics is local. All employment law is state specific. So you have to know the laws in the state in which you are operating and the state in which you have nexus.
Which today is kind of almost impossible, as you have employees scattered all across the
Right.
US, let alone all across
Right.
the world. And we're just transitioning to accelerate to even more of that, right?
Right, but ultimately, you know, where the company is headquartered and is more than likely to be the domicile of where the state law applies, regardless of where the employee is physically located.
Right.
But it is a legal process, and the law changes, and so you need to have, you know, the expertise of an employment lawyer. And the second thing is when you go into the termination agreement process, I say you need to do at least two things. One, you should be scripted so that it's very apparent that you are reading from a script and there
Really?
isn't any deviation. And second of all, you want to have a witness on your side, so it becomes a 2-on-1.
Okay, wait. I wanna dive deeper into these two things. I'm picking up my computer because it's making some funky noises, so I'm taking care of it in the meantime. But you're saying 2-on-1. I mean, you know, I'm thinking about myself coming into a termination room where I'm about to be terminated, and I have two people reading out a script to me. That doesn't feel very personal. It doesn't feel like they care about me too much.
It's actually designed to minimize the litigation fallout, okay?
Okay.
And as the employer, that's what you're concerned. What am I doing in order to prevent the wrongful termination lawsuit?
Right.
And all of the you know, issues that you're talking about are dealt with prior to this. You know, I look at firing as a mutual liberation. Some employee is not living up to their highest and best potential in this organization. You are doing them a career favor by parting ways, because you don't want them to be a suboptimal or sub-performer when they could very well be much better in a different environment, in a different job, you know, depending upon the circumstances. And then you don't want to have the sort of nasty, you know, periodic performance reviews that, you know, basically don't do anything but cast a pall of doubt on an employee. So in some ways, termination is, you know, the human way to end suffering on both parts.
I mean, it sounds very, very rational when you put it that way, but I think that is it also the responsible of the CEO or whoever is managing the termination to make that clear? Because right now, you know, especially as we saw in COVID, a lot of large corporations, the way that they dealt with their termination, and that's, you know, what's in the back of my mind, there was, you know, a whole variety on the whole spectrum of how you deal with termination. A lot of them were accused of wrongful termination. A lot of them were praised for their termination tactics. So what's your take on that?
So, you know, every situation is different, and the law, you know, is different depending upon the circumstances.
Sure.
Most of what you're talking about during COVID-19 would likely fall under what's called a reduction in force.
Okay.
Some of it was a furlough where they were still getting benefits, but they weren't getting any salary.
Right.
You know, I'm talking about a individual who's not performing, and you've taken a lot of necessary steps to try and improve that performance improvement plan, and it's very clear it's just not working. You know, my experience is when it comes to firing or terminating, you want to fire fast and hire slow. Most companies flip it around. They take forever to hire someone, and you know, the firing. I'm sorry, they're very quick to hire.
They hire everybody and they fire slow.
Right, and then they're slow to fire. You want that. You know, what I say is, when do you know it's time to terminate someone? 30 days before you got the first notion in your mind. It's sort of like, in my experience, it doesn't get better. It drags on. It gets worse.
By the way, how many of these have you been involved with? How, like, if you could just, you know, estimate over your career, how many firing dilemmas, situations were you somewhat of a part in?
Oh, probably dozens, where I directly, you know, went in and handled, you know, the termination and so on.
So you've seen it all. You've seen the good, the bad, the ugly. Okay. Wow. Is there a specific occurrence that, you know, sort of like light switch went off and said, like, wow, like there are lessons to be learned about firing when you're giving it so much weight?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you've been through a wrongful termination lawsuit and seen how much time and expense can be taken to sort of patch together a termination that didn't work out, you kind of realize that this is kind of an ugly side of business, and you don't want to, want to avoid this as much as possible.
No, I'm sure. Mark, I'm going into my own journey now, my own entrepreneurial journey. I could only wish for myself that I get, you know, half of the incredible experiences that you've had. And we didn't even mention that right now you're still sitting on quite a few boards, right? On the incredible companies. One of them is a 129-year-old pharmaceutical company.
Pharmaceutical retailer in Seattle, Bartell Drugs. Yes, it's older than Nordstrom's and General Electric.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So you're still very, very active, but I want to use the last minute to get, you know, one or two key pieces of advice that you would have for me as I'm entering my entrepreneurial journey.
So I would talk about finance and raising capital. And I think one of the most important lessons I learned the hard way from my own entrepreneurial journey, and what I try to impart to entrepreneurs as either an investor or a mentor or advisor, is make sure you raise enough capital.
Okay.
And so in my Hispanic supermarket company, we didn't raise enough capital in our first round of financing. And I thought we were going to be able to secure some equipment leasing or equipment financing for the store, and we weren't a credit-worthy tenant or borrower to be able to do that. And we required the personal guarantees of all of the investors. Had we raised enough capital so we could have just purchased it outright and not had to finance it, we would have been in much better shape. And as a result of that experience, myself and my co-founder lost some of our equity. When we sold the business and we had our liquidity event, you know, that equity was worth a substantial amount.
Of course.
And it just reinforced the issue. If we had raised more money, might have had some of that equity.
Very, very fascinating. Mark, right before we leave, I want to thank you again for all this inspiration and And I look forward to maintaining this relationship and continuing to get advice from you. Definitely when I start my own company, it sounds like I have an infinite to learn. But before we leave, I need 3 words from you that best describe you.
I'm a finance and operationally oriented entrepreneur and board member.
And what?
And board member.
Wonderful. Mark, toda rabba. Thank you very, very much. Have a great day and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you, Michael, very much. It was a pleasure, and good luck to you in your entrepreneurial journey.
Thank you. And we didn't even get a chance to talk about how we're both at J Ventures and how much fun I've been having there and your amazing contributions to the fund. So thank you for that too.
Of course. And say hello to our friend Odette.
I definitely will. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye.